Lucas Thompson tightened the clamp around the small, carved truck, his fingers tracing over the wood as he checked for any imperfections. He had spent hours on this piece, crafting every detail with intense focus. Each part, each curve, felt like a silent promise, a personal pledge that he was giving to his brother, Ethan. This truck, just like every other toy he made, represented his hope for the surgery that Ethan desperately needed. Standing nearby, his best friend Ben watched Lucas's hands move, his face a mix of awe and worry. "Lucas," Ben asked, breaking the silence, "do you really think this will make enough money? I mean, for the surgery?" Lucas paused, his hands still on the truck, his eyes staring at it as if looking far beyond the wood. "I don't have a choice, Ben. I have to believe it'll help. Ethan, he needs this. And if I can do anything to help him get there, I'm going to do it." His voice was steady, but a weight lingered in his words. Ben didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around the cramped shed, cluttered with tools that Lucas had collected or inherited, bits of wood piled high on one side, shavings littering the floor. It was a place of simple work, built on dedication and sacrifice. Just then, Olivia Martin walked in, a bright grin on her face as she held up a bag brimming with paints and brushes. "Guess what I got?" she said, excitement lighting up her voice. "Amelia gave me these. She said we could use them on the toys. Maybe some color will make them even more special." Lucas glanced up, a small, grateful smile breaking his focused expression. "Olivia, that's perfect. Thank you." "No problem," she replied, shrugging. "I figured if we're gonna make these toys special, might as well go all out, right?" The three of them got to work, a silent rhythm forming as they each took their roles. Lucas carefully assembled each part, sanding down rough edges and checking every joint. Olivia painted with precision, bringing the toys to life with bold, vibrant colors that seemed to make the wooden shapes pop, while Ben handed each piece over, inspecting them with a careful eye before adding the final touches. As they worked, Lucas's thoughts drifted back to Ethan. Every brush stroke and every carved piece felt like a message he was trying to send to his brother. Hold on, Ethan. I'm doing this for you. But then, a sharp crackle jolted him from his focus. The sound was subtle at first, almost like a whisper among the quiet of the shed. Lucas looked up, brow furrowing as he saw a faint flicker of light near the old wiring. "Lucas, what's that?" Ben's voice was edged with fear, his eyes widening as a spark shot out from the worn wires. Before Lucas could respond, the spark grew, catching onto a stray piece of wood on the floor, igniting faster than any of them could react. In seconds, the flicker became a flame, then a blaze, its light spilling across the room as it grew uncontrollable, consuming the air around them. "Fire!" Ben yelled, grabbing Lucas by the arm and pulling him toward the door as Olivia stumbled backward, her eyes fixed in horror on the spreading flames. The heat intensified, thick smoke filling the shed and choking the air. "Come on!" Lucas shouted, his voice hoarse, pulling Olivia's arm as they dashed out of the door, coughing and struggling to breathe as the smoke billowed around them. They stood outside, gasping, staring helplessly as the shed, filled with all their hours of work, all their hopes, was swallowed by fire. The wood crackled and snapped, the heat warping and twisting the shapes of the toys they had painstakingly made. A deep ache twisted in Lucas's chest as he watched, his throat tight, his mind racing with disbelief. All his efforts, weeks, even months of late nights and endless carving, sanding, painting, all of it was gone, erased in mere moments. Beside him, Ben's eyes were filled with tears as he whispered, "What do we do now?" Lucas couldn't answer, his voice lost somewhere between shock and sorrow. He felt a gentle hand on his shoulder and turned to see Olivia, her face shadowed with grief, but her expression soft, supportive. He looked back at the burning shed, a wave of helplessness washing over him. For the first time, he truly felt as though he was fighting a battle he couldn't win. "I don't know," he whispered, barely able to get the words out. The next morning, Lucas left the house as early as he could, moving quickly past the neighbors' curious glances. News of the fire had spread fast, and he could feel the unspoken questions in their looks. He wanted to escape that feeling, to hide somewhere no one knew what had happened, where no one would ask if he was okay when everything inside him still felt charred like the ruins of his shed. But as he slipped around the corner, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Reluctantly, he answered, half expecting it to be his mom or one of his classmates asking about the fire. "Lucas Thompson?" A woman's voice, clear and direct, came through the line. Yeah, this is Lucas," he replied cautiously. This is Emily Clark. I'm a reporter for the Pine Grove Journal. She paused, as if gauging his reaction. I heard about the fire last night, and I'd really like to speak with you. Are you free to meet today? Lucas hesitated. The idea of sharing his situation with a reporter felt uncomfortable. It was hard enough explaining everything to himself, let alone to someone who might turn it into a story for everyone to read. But he thought about Ethan, and the money they'd been working so hard to save, now little more than ashes in the shed. Maybe, he thought, this would help others understand why he worked so hard. After a long silence, he finally replied, "All right. I can meet you at the coffee shop on Main." Within the hour, Lucas was seated across from Emily in a booth at Joe's coffee shop, fidgeting with his hands as she arranged her notebook and recorder on the table. She was younger than he expected, with kind but keen eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Thank you for meeting with me, Lucas," she began, giving him a reassuring smile. "I know this might feel strange, but I promise, I'm here to understand, not to intrude." Lucas nodded, unsure of where to start. "Maybe you can tell me a little bit about why you started making the toys," she prompted gently. He took a deep breath. "It's for my brother Ethan," he began, his voice quieter than he'd intended. "He's younger than me. He has this heart condition. He's had it since he was a baby, but it's gotten worse." He paused, searching for the right words. "The doctors said he needs surgery. And my mom. She works so hard, but it's not enough. So I thought maybe I could help." Emily's expression softened, her pen hovering over her notebook as she listened intently. "How did you come up with the idea of making toys?" she asked, her eyes focused on him in a way that felt less like an interview and more like a real conversation. "I don't know," Lucas said with a slight shrug. "I remember my dad used to make these little wooden cars for us when we were younger. He'd sit with me and show me how to carve the wood, how to make something out of nothing. I guess I just thought I could try doing the same." Emily nodded, jotting down notes, but he could see the understanding in her expression, a kind of empathy he hadn't expected. "So you've been making these toys, selling them on weekends. And then the fire," she trailed off, allowing him to continue. Lucas's face tightened. "Yeah. We'd been working on these toys for weeks. My friends, Ben and Olivia, they helped me a lot. We were all set for the market this weekend, hoping to make enough to cover some of the surgery cost. And then just like that, it was all gone." He could see her eyes narrow with concern as she took it all in. "That's incredibly tough, Lucas. You've been carrying so much on your shoulders." She closed her notebook, leaning forward slightly. "I know this won't fix everything, but I think your story could really touch people. I'd like to write an article about you and Ethan. Maybe it'll bring some help your way." Lucas looked down, biting his lip. He felt exposed, raw, but he also felt a glimmer of hope creeping back in. "Do you really think people would care?" he asked quietly, his voice betraying a vulnerability he usually kept hidden. Emily placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Lucas, you're not just making toys. You're building a bridge between your own hope and someone else's. That's a story that needs to be told." That evening, Lucas sat on his bed, holding a copy of the newspaper in his hands. As he scanned the article, each line felt like a piece of his heart laid bare on the page. Emily had captured the essence of his struggle, his love for Ethan, the fire, and the weight he carried each day. Reading it, he could feel that, for the first time, others might understand why he worked so tirelessly. He closed his eyes, letting the words sink in, feeling a spark of something unfamiliar, a belief that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Several days after the article's publication, Lucas was sitting by the kitchen table, reviewing some sketches for new toy designs, his mind drifting back to the thought of Ethan and the now empty fund for his surgery. Each line he drew felt like an effort to hold on to hope, though deep down, he wondered if things would ever truly change. Then, he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Curious, Lucas went to the door, cautiously peering out. A sleek, dark car he had never seen before sat in front of the house. From it stepped a man in his late 40s, tall and striking, dressed in a crisp suit, and radiating an air of confidence. Following him was a blonde woman, neatly dressed, carrying a sleek leather folder under her arm. They both looked out of place here, amid the humble, worn houses of Pine Grove. Lucas's heart raced with a mixture of curiosity and unease as the man approached the front steps. Noticing Lucas standing at the doorway, The man's expression softened into a warm, genuine smile. "Are you Lucas Thompson?" he asked, his voice steady, with an unmistakable kindness behind it. Lucas nodded cautiously, sizing up the visitor. "Yes, that's me." The man extended a hand, and Lucas shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone used to making big decisions. "I'm Michael Reynolds," the man introduced himself, his voice carrying both warmth and authority. "I'm a businessman. I read about you in the Pine Grove Journal, and I have to say your story really moved me." He gestured to the woman by his side. "And this is my assistant, Sarah Miller." Sarah nodded politely, giving Lucas a reassuring smile. "Nice to meet you, Lucas. We're both here because we believe in what you're doing and think you're someone truly special." Lucas's eyes widened, and he felt his mind race. The idea that someone, a complete stranger, had come all this way after reading the article left him almost speechless. He glanced quickly toward the living room, where he could see the top of Ethan's head from behind the couch. He felt his protective instincts flare up, a wave of skepticism mingling with hope. What do you mean, exactly?" Lucas asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Michael nodded, clearly sensing Lucas's cautious reaction. "I don't want to overwhelm you, Lucas. I came here because I think I can help. What you're doing for your brother is inspiring, sacrificing your time, making toys to raise money for Ethan's surgery. It's rare to see that kind of dedication, especially in someone your age." Lucas swallowed, the raw vulnerability of his situation suddenly feeling exposed. But Michael's gaze was kind and respectful, and it made Lucas feel, if not fully comfortable, at least a little less guarded. "Here's the thing," Michael continued. "I'd like to offer my support, Lucas. I can cover the costs of your brother's surgery, and more than that." He glanced toward the backyard, where the remnants of the burned-down shed were still visible. "I'd like to rebuild your workshop. Make it even better than before, with all the tools you'll need." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Lucas felt his throat tighten, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what he was hearing. Part of him wanted to question it, to wonder why a man like Michael would care so much, but a stronger part, one driven by the fierce love he had for Ethan, dared to hope that this was real. Why would you do that for us?" Lucas asked finally, his voice quiet. Michael's expression softened further, and he took a step closer. "Because people like you remind me why I started doing this work in the first place. When I read about your story, I felt like I was reading about the kind of determination and love that deserves every chance it can get. It's a rare thing, Lucas, and it deserves to be nurtured." Lucas felt his eyes begin to sting, and he fought back tears. He could feel the weight of all the days he'd spent carving and sanding, the late nights in the shed, the aching worry about his brother, everything he'd kept inside. And now, here was someone offering to make that weight lighter. Michael extended his hand again, this time a pledge rather than a greeting. "What do you say?" For a moment, Lucas simply stared, struggling to find his voice. Then he took Michael's hand, nodding, his voice barely a whisper. I don't even know how to thank you." Michael gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "You don't need to thank me, Lucas. Just keep being the amazing brother you are. That's more than enough." While Michael and Sarah worked out the logistics of covering Ethan's surgery and rebuilding the shed, Detective Robert Wilson reviewed the case with a keen eye. The fire had been deemed accidental, but certain details still unsettled him. He wanted to be thorough, to ensure no factor had been overlooked. His instincts told him that even small fires often had complex origins, and this case deserved the same attention as any other. A few days later, he arrived at the Thompsons' home, his notepad in hand, ready to ask Lucas a few questions. Lucas answered the door, his expression a mixture of curiosity and residual anxiety from the recent upheaval. "Lucas Thompson?" the detective asked, offering a small nod in greeting. "Mind if I ask you a few questions about the night of the fire?" Lucas straightened, caught off guard but obliging. Sure. Come in." Robert glanced around the modest living room as he entered, taking in the framed pictures on the walls, the subtle signs of a hard-working family. He could hear the murmur of the television in the background, where Ethan lay curled up on the couch, absorbed in a cartoon. Lucas gestured for the detective to follow him into the kitchen, where they could talk privately. "Lucas," Robert began, his tone steady but friendly, "I wanted to follow up with you personally. Fires like this, well, they can be unpredictable, but sometimes it helps to go over things again. I just need to confirm a few details." Lucas nodded, folding his hands together on the table, a bit of tension evident in his posture. The fire had been sudden, a whirlwind that had left him reeling. He wasn't eager to relive it, but he understood the importance. "Did you notice anything unusual in the shed before the fire started?" Robert asked, pen poised over his notebook. Lucas thought back, his brows knitting together as he recalled the days leading up to the fire. "I remember hearing this strange buzzing sound a few times, but I didn't really think much of it," he admitted. "The wiring in there was old, I guess, but I didn't think it would cause something like that." Robert nodded, taking notes. Old wiring can be a risk, especially if it's exposed to dust, wood shavings, all kinds of things that build up in a shed like yours. Lucas looked down, a hint of guilt flickering across his face. "I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know how, and, well, I guess I just hoped it would hold up." The detective softened, sensing Lucas's self-blame. "Lucas, these things happen more often than you'd think. And without regular maintenance, electrical issues can catch anyone off guard." He paused, looking at the young man before him with a compassionate eye. "You were just trying to do something good for your brother. There's no fault in that." Lucas's shoulders relaxed slightly at the reassurance, but a lingering question gnawed at him. "So, it really was just the wiring? Nothing else?"
Robert mit Gase.
"It was an unfortunate accident, yes. The short circuit was bound to happen sooner or later, given the state of the wiring. It's something you couldn't have known to fix on your own." Lucas nodded slowly, the explanation settling in. Still, he felt the weight of everything that had been lost in the fire, the toys they had crafted so carefully, the plans they had worked so hard to realize. He'd spent nights sanding, carving, and dreaming of the money those toys might bring in for Ethan's surgery. And yet, all of it had been reduced to ashes in a matter of minutes. Noticing Lucas's introspection, Robert added, "We can make sure the new shed is wired safely. I understand that Michael is helping you rebuild." Lucas managed a small smile, thinking of Michael's unexpected generosity. "Yeah, he is. He and his assistant, Sarah, they're taking care of everything. New tools, better materials, even fixing the wiring." "Good," Robert said, a slight smile breaking his usually serious demeanor. "Sounds like you'll be well set up. Sometimes, things do have a way of working out." Lucas looked up, his expression shifting to one of determination. "I just want it to be safe for Ethan. For all of us." Robert placed a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder as he stood. "And it will be. Now that we know what caused this, we can make sure it doesn't happen again." Lucas watched as the detective left, feeling as though a part of the weight he'd been carrying had lifted. The shed stood gleaming and sturdy, freshly rebuilt with new walls and reinforced wiring. Lucas felt a strange sense of awe as he looked around, taking in the neatly organized tools hanging on hooks, the smooth new workbenches, and shelves filled with high-quality wood in different shades and grains. It looked nothing like the makeshift shed he'd once worked in, with its second-hand tools and worn-down materials. He ran his hand over the polished wood of the workbench, a mix of gratitude and determination swelling within him. Ben and Olivia entered the shed, both staring in amazement at the space. "Wow, Lucas," Ben breathed, his eyes wide. "It's like a real workshop. I mean, a professional one." Olivia nodded, smiling as she traced her fingers over the assortment of brushes and paint jars lined up on a shelf. "We're going to make toys better than ever now. Ethan's going to love this." Lucas smiled, a flicker of pride lighting up his face. "It's all thanks to Michael, and to everyone who's helped us." Just then, Jason Brooks, the town's veteran carpenter, walked in, carrying a toolbox. With his grizzled beard, rugged hands, and slow, deliberate movements, Jason commanded respect from everyone who knew him. He looked around the workshop, a small smile of approval softening his usually serious expression. "Not bad," Jason said, setting his toolbox on a bench and looking at Lucas. "Ready to get to work?" Lucas nodded eagerly. Over the past few weeks, Jason had been coming by almost every day, volunteering his time to teach Lucas the art of advanced woodworking. What had started as Lucas's simple carvings of trucks and cars was now growing into something far more refined. "All right," Jason said, picking up a block of wood and examining it closely. Lesson 1. Understanding the material. Wood has a grain, a personality. You can't just force it into what you want. You have to work with it, let it tell you what it wants to be. Lucas listened intently, nodding as he watched Jason's hands move over the wood with practiced ease. "Lucas," Jason continued, "every toy you make isn't just wood or paint. It's a part of you. It holds your intentions, your care. Kids can feel that." He turned to Lucas, his eyes sharp yet warm. "It's why your toys matter. They're not just toys, they're pieces of hope, crafted with love." The words struck Lucas deeply. He looked down at his hands, realizing the responsibility he held in each carving, each brushstroke. These toys were a connection to Ethan, to the love that kept him going even in the hardest times. "Show me," Jason said, gesturing to a block of wood. "What would you make from this?" Lucas examined the wood closely, running his fingers over its surface. "A train," he murmured thoughtfully. "Ethan loves trains. I could make something small but detailed, something he could carry with him." Jason nodded, impressed. "Good. Start there. Pay attention to the details. Don't rush." As Lucas began carving, Jason guided his hands, showing him how to hold the tools at precise angles and how to shave off just the right amount of wood. Lucas could feel himself learning, not just from instruction but through Jason's stories about his own childhood, about the years he'd spent learning to appreciate craftsmanship. "You know," Jason said, watching Lucas carefully carve a small wheel, "I started woodworking because my grandfather did it. He'd spend hours, never in a hurry. It taught me patience." "That's what you're learning, Lucas. Patience and pride in what you make." Lucas worked in silence, absorbed in every stroke of the chisel, feeling the wood transform under his hands. He glanced up and noticed Olivia painting a finished piece on another workbench, her hands steady, each brushstroke precise and vibrant. Meanwhile, Ben was sanding down parts, his movements rhythmic and focused. Jason watched the three of them, his stern face softening as he observed their teamwork. "You've got a good team here, Lucas," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Cherish that. People don't always stick around when things get tough, but it seems like these two do." Lucas looked up, meeting Ben and Olivia's eyes, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Yeah, I'm really lucky." They worked for hours, Jason guiding them through each step, teaching them techniques he'd taken decades to master. Lucas felt a confidence growing within him. It wasn't just about helping Ethan anymore, he was learning to love the craft itself, to appreciate the process, the patience, the art of creation. Finally, as the day drew to a close, Jason stood back, crossing his arms with a nod of satisfaction as he examined Lucas's work. The toy train sat completed, every detail in place, its smooth, polished wood gleaming under the lights. Lucas's heart swelled with pride as he looked at it, imagining Ethan's face lighting up when he saw it. "Beautiful work," Jason said, patting Lucas's shoulder. "Remember this feeling. That pride, it's something you earned." Lucas nodded, absorbing the words. He realized that this was more than just a workshop now. It was a place of purpose, a place where his efforts, his love for Ethan, and his own dreams all came together. This was only the beginning. After Ethan's surgery, the whole house felt different. Karen was the first to notice his small signs of improvement, the faint color that returned to his cheeks, the way he seemed to breathe easier, the glint of energy that appeared in his eyes for the first time in years. Even the smallest movement, the way he would hold a cup or shift in his chair without needing as much help, spoke to the relief they all felt but barely dared to express. Ethan was coming back to life in ways that no one but his family could fully understand. One afternoon, Lucas knocked gently on Ethan's bedroom door, holding a small cloth bag behind his back. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that felt full and rich, layered with memories and a newfound hope. Lucas entered and found Ethan sitting by the window, his gaze focused on the garden outside. For the first time in months, he looked peaceful. "Ethan," Lucas said, unable to hold back a smile, "I have something for you." Ethan turned, his face brightening the moment he saw his older brother. He shifted slightly in his chair, trying to sit up straighter, curiosity lighting up his eyes. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice soft but filled with eagerness. Lucas took a deep breath and brought the cloth bag forward, placing it in Ethan's lap. Inside was a small wooden train, one Lucas had carefully carved and painted in the new workshop. Every curve, every wheel, every detail had been shaped with purpose. It was more than just a toy, it was a promise, a symbol of everything Lucas had endured to see his brother here, safe, and on the path to recovery. "Go on," Lucas urged gently, "take a look." Ethan untied the string around the bag and carefully pulled out the train. His hand shook slightly as he held it up, marveling at the glossy finish, the smooth edges, the tiny windows and wheels painted with care. It was small enough for him to hold comfortably, yet detailed in a way that made it feel like a treasure. You made this for me?" Ethan's voice was thick with emotion, his gaze fixed on Lucas as if he was trying to grasp the depth of what his brother had done. Lucas's smile softened, and he knelt beside his brother's chair, his hand resting on the armrest, fingers lightly brushing against Ethan's. "Yeah. I made it just for you. Every late night, every hour spent carving, sanding, all of it, Ethan. I needed to know that somehow this was helping you, that you'd hold on." Ethan's grip tightened around the train as he looked back at it, running his fingers along its polished surface, tracing the details that Lucas had carved so carefully. It was more than just wood and paint. To Ethan, it was the embodiment of all the nights he had spent in the hospital, fighting to breathe, and all the nights Lucas had spent in the workshop, fighting to find a way to give his brother hope. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. I knew you were working on something, even when I wasn't here. I could feel it." He paused, blinking away a tear. "When I was lying in that hospital bed, sometimes it felt like I was carrying a little piece of you with me." Lucas felt his throat tighten. He knew exactly what Ethan meant, because every carving, every stroke of paint had been infused with the thought of Ethan. Every piece he had made had been a way of keeping that connection alive, even when they were miles apart. "You don't know what that means to me," Lucas said quietly, his own voice thick with emotion. "But you were the one who made this possible, Ethan. You were my reason to keep going, even when things got tough. I think you gave me strength just by holding on." They sat in silence for a few moments, the connection between them so strong that words felt unnecessary. In that silence, they both felt the weight of the journey they had endured together. The setbacks, the fires, the sleepless nights, the fears that had loomed over them for so long. And yet, here they were, both holding the proof of that journey, that resilience. Finally, Ethan broke the silence, his gaze shifting from the train to his brother. "Lucas, one day I want to do what you did. I want to help you. I want to be part of making these toys, to help other kids feel what you helped me feel." Lucas's heart swelled at his brother's words. Ethan had always been a quiet child, but the resolve in his voice now was unmistakable. Lucas realized that, just as he had been inspired to help Ethan now felt driven to help others. "We'll make it happen, Ethan," Lucas said, his smile widening. "You're going to be part of this, as much as you want. We'll make toys together, and we'll give other kids the same hope we found here." Ethan nodded, his gaze unwavering, the spark in his eyes brighter than ever. Holding the train close to his chest, he looked out the window once more, but this time, with a new sense of purpose. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Lucas by his side, he felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. They were in this together, and that made all the difference. The support Lucas had received after Ethan's surgery lit something new within him, a desire to take his work beyond his family, beyond Pine Grove, and reach other children who needed hope. He knew he didn't want to stop making toys just because Ethan was getting better. He wanted to share that joy, to create toys that could carry hope to other kids facing tough times. And so, alongside Ben, Olivia, and even Ethan, who was growing stronger every day, Lucas decided to build on what they had started. Together, they began crafting toys for children in hospitals, shelters, and care centers, kids who, like Ethan, needed a reminder that they weren't alone. The new shed, now officially a workshop, became a bustling center of creativity and purpose. It was no longer just a place to make toys. It was a symbol of the resilience that Lucas and his friends had forged together. Each time they gathered there, they felt that energy, that determination to make a difference. They began calling it Toys of Hope. One evening, Lucas sat at his workbench with Ethan beside him, the younger boy now eagerly joining in on the process. Lucas carefully handed him a block of wood, watching as Ethan traced its edges with his small hands. "Do you think kids will feel it?" Ethan asked quietly, looking up at Lucas. "The way you made me feel." Lucas placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice gentle but confident. "They'll feel it, Ethan. Every toy we make, every little detail, it's all going to show them that someone cares. That's the most important part." Ethan nodded, a quiet resolve filling his gaze. He began sanding the piece of wood with care, his movements slow but steady, as though he were putting a piece of himself into the toy. Ben and Olivia worked at the other end of the table, both focused on their parts. Ben, who had grown more skillful with tools, was shaping a small, curved figure that would soon become part of a set of animals for a young girl who loved stories of the jungle. Olivia, with her delicate touch, painted bright colors onto a row of tiny wooden cars, each one detailed and unique. One day, as they were finishing up a new batch of toys, Lucas noticed a familiar face at the door. Emily Clark, the journalist who had written the article that had brought Michael into their lives, stood there, her camera in hand, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Emily." Lucas greeted her, surprised and pleased to see her. She stepped inside, taking in the workshop filled with toys in various stages of creation. "I had to come back, Lucas," she said, her tone a mix of admiration and respect. "I heard about Toys of Hope, and I knew there was more to your story that needed to be shared." Emily set up her camera, capturing shots of the brightly colored toys lined up on the workbench, the paintbrushes scattered among jars of paint, and the faces of Lucas, Ethan, Ben, and Olivia as they worked with quiet focus and determination. She watched them, noticing the way they communicated without words, each of them completely committed to the task in front of them. After a while, Emily motioned for Lucas to join her outside the shed. "I'd love to ask you a few questions about what inspired you to expand your work," she said, holding up her notebook. "It's rare to see young people this dedicated. You're making a real impact here, Lucas." Lucas looked back at the workshop, a pride swelling in his chest. "Honestly, it all started with Ethan. When he got sick, I didn't know what else to do. Making toys felt like something small I could do for him. But after everything that happened, the fire, the support from Michael, everyone who stepped in to help us, I realized that maybe I could do more. That there are a lot of kids like Ethan out there who could use a reminder that they're not alone." Emily nodded, scribbling down his words. "It's an amazing mission, Lucas. And what do you want people to feel when they hear about Toys of Hope?" He thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I want people to feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves. Even when things seem impossible, there's always someone who cares, someone willing to help. I want them to feel like there's hope, even in the hardest times." Emily's eyes softened, visibly moved. "You're an inspiration to all of us, Lucas," she said, her voice quiet but full of conviction. He looked down, a small grateful smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, Emily. I never expected any of this, but I'm really glad it happened." As she packed up her things, Emily took a final look around the workshop, her heart full. She knew that this story was more than just about toys. It was about resilience, about a young boy who had turned his own struggles into hope for others. The following week, her new article on Lucas and the Toys of Hope project would be published, and this time, it would reach beyond Pine Grove. With Emily's latest article published, Toys of Hope reached far beyond the town of Pine Grove. Donations started coming in from people Lucas had never met, people whose lives had intersected with his only through the words of a story. Some sent money, while others contributed materials, blocks of high-quality wood, paints in every imaginable shade, brushes, tools, even boxes of fabric scraps to make stuffed animals and doll clothes. Letters flooded in too, some from families who had read about Lucas's mission, and others from kids who wanted to help him make toys in their own towns. Every package, every letter carried a reminder that Toys of Hope was becoming something larger than any of them had imagined. One afternoon, Michael Reynolds arrived at the workshop for a visit. He entered quietly, observing the busy, bustling atmosphere with a look of satisfaction. Lucas, Ben, Olivia, and Ethan were deep into their tasks, surrounded by stacks of brightly colored toys and boxes ready for shipping. "Lucas," Michael called, his voice warm as he approached him. Lucas looked up from a nearly completed train he'd been working on, smiling at the sight of Michael. "Hey, Michael. Good to see you." Michael extended a hand, and Lucas took it, their handshake a moment of shared pride and understanding. "It's good to see all of you here," Michael said, his gaze sweeping over the team. "I wanted to stop by because I wanted you to know, you've started something big here. This is only the beginning, Lucas." Lucas glanced around, seeing his friends each engrossed in their work. Olivia was painting intricate designs on wooden animals, her brush moving with practiced skill. Ben was sanding down toy cars, his eyes focused, ensuring each one was smooth enough to be held safely in small hands. And Ethan, who now joined them almost daily, was carefully assembling parts for a new batch of toys, his hands steady and eyes filled with pride. As Lucas watched his friends, he realized how far they'd come together. What had started as a desperate attempt to fund Ethan's surgery had grown into something powerful, something that extended far beyond his family. He could see now that they were giving hope not just to kids who received the toys, but to everyone who became a part of the project, whether by donating, volunteering, or just believing in their mission. Michael leaned in slightly, his tone sincere. "Lucas, your dedication. It's the spark that turned this into more than just a workshop. Every person who reads about Toys of Hope, everyone who donates or gets involved, they're becoming part of something that lifts us all up. You've built more than toys here. You've built a movement." Lucas felt his chest tighten with gratitude and pride. He hadn't set out to create something so big. He had only wanted to help his brother. But here he was, surrounded by people he trusted and inspired by countless others he hadn't even met, all working together toward a shared vision. He turned to Michael, his eyes bright. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without the help you gave us when we needed it most." Michael shook his head, smiling.
No, Lucas.
"All I did was show up. You did the hard work. You're the one with the vision and the drive." He paused, looking around the room once more. "But I'll always be here to support you. Toys of Hope has a bright future, and you can count on me to help however I can." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the quiet hum of the workshop around them, filled with sounds of sanding, painting, and laughter. Lucas felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of peace and accomplishment that he hadn't fully felt before. This workshop had once been a place of struggle, a place where he had poured all his worries, his dreams, and his fears. Now it was a place of unity, of purpose, a place that had been rebuilt from the ashes stronger than ever. As Michael turned to leave, he clapped Lucas on the back. "I'll be in touch soon. And Lucas," he added, a thoughtful look in his eyes, "don't ever underestimate what you've started here." After Michael left, Lucas returned to the workbench, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He looked around at his friends, his brother, and all the toys they'd created. It was no longer about any one person or one goal. It was about every child who would hold one of their toys, every person who saw hope in what they were doing. As he picked up his tools and got back to work, he realized something profound, that sometimes, the fire that threatens to destroy everything is the same flame that can reignite hope. He understood now that the journey he'd started had only begun and that each new day in the workshop would be part of a legacy, a chain of generosity that would continue to grow, reaching countless others who needed it most.
If you've made it this far, then subscribe to the channel and leave a comment.